So Cathie Wood is buying the dip over at ARK Invest, and the question is, how about you? Hey everyone, this is Chris. Welcome back to the channel, and this is your daily Uncut news. So yeah, we got to talk about Cathie Wood. They're buying up a bunch of Tesla, as you guys know. Tesla had a pretty crashy day. I think it was down like 8 or 9%, something like that. That was down on the robot thing, and also too down on missing on their deliveries. One thing that's really quite interesting though is that Cathie Wood certainly establish where they think Tesla's worth it, and I'm going to show you guys. So I'm not a huge fan of Tesla. I'm not saying it's a bad company in a stretch, but mostly just its valuation. So at the right price, I would say sure, buy Tesla stock at the right price. And certainly that is debatable what that is. But according to Cathie Wood and the team, if you guys are into this stuff, they're buying around here. So that was back in June. And they're also buying around here, which is what, I guess they were saying around the 250-ish or under. And I think back then it was around the 200-ish mark. So this is something that is a very real thing. Yes, stocks do have some sort of inherent value, but it's all in the eye of the beholder, because if a particular big buyer wants to come and scoop up shares, that will offer some support. I myself, if someone, push come to shove and say, hey, what would you buy? What would you have to buy if you're forced to buy something? I would be more apt to take something like that a Warren Buffett is in. So for me, that would be like an Occidental, something like an Apple, something like a Paramount, those kind of things. But I get it, guys. If you follow Cathie Wood and ARK, you probably should be picking up Tesla when they buy. I'm saying if you follow them. Me, I'm more of a Buffett person, or theoretically you could do a mix of Buffett and Cathie Wood. Although overall, as a whole, I am still bearish on the market as a whole. So, but just to let you know, Cathie Wood is buying the dip, and love to hear what you guys think about that as well. Also, too, going around the markets, which is sort of why I'm still bearish, as I still see these kind of negative headlines. This is one where Facebook, Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, and the team, they're closing an office in New York, and essentially what's going on is, remember guys, if you want to see stocks go up, you want companies to make more money, because essentially they trade on how much companies do, how much money do companies going to make in the future. And these kind of things, I mean, you could read it one or two ways. One, you could say, well, Facebook is slowing down and therefore they're not expanding anymore, and that's not a part of a business I want to be in. Or you could read the other way of like, oh my God, Facebook's so smart. They are cutting costs to try to, boost the bottom line. So you could read it one or two ways, depending on how positive you are on Facebook. Essentially, they're investing a ton of money in the whole metaverse thing. I myself am not seeing it. That's just me. I don't want to wear goggles. I mentioned that so many times, and this idea that we're going to go into a virtual office and like hang out with avatars and stuff. I'm not seeing it, but some people may see something that I don't, and maybe years from now, Facebook and Meta and Mark Zuckerberg could be right. You never know. But I'm not seeing me myself, and they are closing offices. Also, too, the other story going on around the markets today. What's going on with Credit Suisse? It depends who you ask. So, as you guys know, we talked about this. They were calling people over the weekend saying, hey, we're all okay. Everything's okay. Pay no attention to those credit default swaps. Pay no attention to those big bets against us. Pay no attention to that. We're doing fine. And that was a weird thing to do over the weekend. Evidently, though, this sort of tied in with the UK U-turn on the tax cuts for the wealthy, and the pound started picking up again. Credit Suisse is stabilizing a bit. The thing is, I've read estimates that for the new reorganization plan, they may need anywhere from $4 billion to $6 billion, in that range. No one knows exactly. One of the things to be aware of, which I think is kind of interesting, when you compare Credit Suisse to all the other banks, this would be in Europe, you can see like they're down 55%, which is really a lot. That's a big difference. And one of the things I thought was quite interesting, just to paint on a positive note, if anyone can explain this to me, this Caixa Bank, they're up 37%, and that's a major swing compared to Credit Suisse, and this is like, I believe it's in Spain. So if anyone knows what's up with that one, that's an interesting one. I couldn't figure it out quickly enough to share with you, but I do know Credit Suisse is risky. I've read different things on this where, some people are like, what, don't touch it. This thing's toxic. Some people are like, man, this could be, a big play if you're into risky stuff. But nowhere do I hear anyone's like, oh my God, this is so great. This is your chance to get in. I haven't heard anyone say that. Mostly just, it's really, really risky, or it's risky, but there could be upside. So we'll see how this plays out. And again, we're looking for that October 27th date where they're going to announce what their plans are going to be to turn the bank around, essentially. Other things that I would think is really interesting, you're going to see this a lot going forward, is essentially fund managers, companies, etc. Everyone's going to be fighting for what they think is going to be the most important thing, and that's going to be the bottom line. And so you may see some abandonment from this ESG talk, which I think is quite interesting. It's not just companies, but also investors. I'll give you a simple example. So if you're a university fund and someone used to came on a podcast last year. He's actually he manages the University of Pennsylvania trust fund, I think you want to call it trust fund, the endowment. Sorry, the endowment, and it's like some crazy number, like $4 billion, something like that. But one of the things that I remember he told me was universities are very reticent of say investing in say oil companies, like these kind of things. This is something really quite interesting because essentially fund managers will be essentially turning around that kind of policy because, frankly, right now, oil companies are really, really good. And so that's something to have to wrestle with. And the same as well as where CEOs of companies may be kind of brushing that stuff aside, thinking, you know what, we don't really need to talk about the environment that much, and we're just going to focus on the bottom line. So I just think this is something kind of interesting. As the market takes a downturn, people focus on profits, right? And take that as you will. I myself believe this whole thing, ESG thing, is just a marketing gimmick. And I've mentioned this before when I did a thing. Basically, there was an ETF saying, hey, if you're pro-conservative values, buy this ETF, which is also a marketing gimmick. At the end of the day, I think people care about the bottom line. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. One of the things that I also want to emphasize today, which I think is a really big theme that we've been talking about in the markets for a while now, is sort of shift of where money is going. Same thing with the ESG thing. Maybe money shifting back more traditional kind of investing or even business practices. Also, too, you can just have a shift of investment. So as it turns out, the Koreans are investing in USA. We know that the car companies, so like a Hyundai, Kia, are investing in the US, and there was a little bit of poo-pooing. Basically, the Biden people were not giving the EV tax credits to the Korean car manufacturers. And obviously, if you're a Korean car manufacturer and you're creating jobs in USA, you're like, yo, what's going on? I get it, we're not an American car company, but like we're building plants and giving Americans jobs. So what's up? And this is something too that just to be aware. Samsung is building a new plant essentially right outside of Austin. I guess they already have one there, but they're going to be building another one in the neighboring city. And so these are real things. Like investment dollars can go all around the world the same way. America's built plants in other countries. Other countries can build plants in USA. So Samsung is an example of that, and they're expanding. And you guys know Samsung; they got money over there. One thing that's interesting too is Naver, which is also a Korean company. You guys know I'm in Korea, so I'm familiar with all these companies. Naver is basically the Google of Korea, if you don't know. A very, very big company, very, very popular. They have all kinds of services, and they're basically the number one search engine in Korea. And it's a pretty stout. What do you want to call it? Stout technology. Like they have maps, and they have the emails, and they have the forums, and the shopping. It's like Google basically. But they bought Poshmark, which I think is really quite interesting. $1.2 billion. I've never used Poshmark, so I don't have any opinion on this at all. I'd love to hear from you guys if any of you guys have ever used Poshmark. I mean, I know what the website is. I looked at it. I was like, I've never used this thing. And so basically what it sounds like, it's kind of like an eBay kind of thing. The stock's been taking a dive, so I don't know if that's a smart move for them or not. But they are making moves to expand. So Naver bought Poshmark, which is really quite interesting. So we'll start to see more money flowing in different places. And this is another example of this is essentially, as you guys know, we talked about this where Apple has a lot of their production basically in China, right? And there's been reports that essentially there's a couple things going on. One is India is offering incentives for American companies to come to India, and also to, essentially Apple's looking to cut their exposure from China. It's basically a China plus one or two other countries for your production. So I keep saying India and Vietnam is going to be placed, maybe Indonesia, which we talked about those three. And this is quite interesting, but evidently the iPhone production is doubling from last year. And these phones coming from India, I guess they mostly go to the Middle East or Europe. So it's just the way the supply chains work. So as of now, I'm pretty sure most iPhones and stuff like that are coming from China when they come to the U.S. But I'm not actually sure. No, they actually do know. They come from, obviously, here in Korea. They do come from China. I do know that. Also, too, which is really quite interesting, the Asian markets turned it around a bit. This is also just sort of rallying off of what happened in the UK, because we all thought the UK was melting, and they still might be melting. I've read different reports on that because they're still facing a budget deficit. And I always love to hear from people in the community that are in the UK. Just like to hear what you guys are thinking. I think the big thing is that winter is coming, and so that is a definite concern for many people because energy costs are going to be going up. We mentioned this a little bit earlier in the day, but now we have pictures Essentially, North Korea fired a missile over Japan, and I remember the earlier report was saying like over the TV, people got like this black screen with white letters that basically said, missiles coming, and that's pretty scary, to be honest. And now that I see the map, you guys can see for yourself, it literally is over Japan and landing into the sea on the other side. But I mean, nobody wants that. Just imagine you're in like, living in Florida, and Cuba launches a missile that flies over Florida and lands into the ocean. I mean, you're not gonna like it, right? It's kind of a crazy thing because being Korea, like it happens, and it's not. It's news. Of course, it's news, but people aren't really freaking out about it. But it hasn't happened since like I think 2017 was the last time, so it's been a while. But it's not a good thing. No one wants that. And as a result, the in the stock market in Korea and in Japan, the defense stocks are all rallying, and that's why I told you guys that for a long time. I still think defense stocks are going to be good moving forward, and I just think forever, depending on how can I say, depending on what the economy does, up, down, left, right, those kind of stocks do well, just because the government's always going to be spending money on this stuff. And also, too, we're going to have needs in Europe to replace all the weapons that have been used in the Ukraine war. The other thing that's going on as well is, obviously, you guys know tensions with U.S.-China are high, and the attractiveness of China keeps going down. This is essentially, we've known these numbers coming out. We've talked about it before, but this newer chart that I'm looking at here I think really illustrates perfectly sort of the growth rates in China. And so take a look at this. So back in 2010, and so I left. I was in China 3 different times. I can't remember the dates. It basically was like the end of the like the 08s, 09s, and then kind of the mid-teens of China is kind of where I was in. So probably right or between here and here, I guess. So I was in periods of high growth, right? So I haven't been back to China since like COVID, everything shut down, so I haven't been back. But you can see essentially the growth rate of their GDPs has been going down, and they're forecasting here, 2.5, something like that. Whereas the government would rather have it more like 5. So it's just not as attractive as it used to be. You're not seeing double-digit growth like there were before. And the other thing, too, is you also have the political problems of essentially why money is pulling away from China and maybe going to like an India or Vietnam, like, for example. I saw this as kind of interesting, and this is messed up. So if you are a foreigner and you have want to put embassies and stuff in that in Hong Kong, China wants your floor plans. It's like, why do you want our floor plans? And kind of the worry about it is that China wants to bug all of the offices and stuff like that. So I'm sure you guys noticed that this is a bit of BS. And this is sort of the game that China's always played. Is like basically their point of view is always, if you want to play ball with us, you play by our rules. And this is something that's been going on as well right now. There's negotiations between the essentially the U.S. and the Chinese accounting teams over what's going on with the Chinese listed stocks on the market. So we'll see. Keep an eye on that. But when you see these kind of things, it's pretty messed up. Also, too, you guys know when we're talking about inflation, this is a big driver of the markets these days. You need to get supply of food to come up again. Basically, we're having shortages of food. It's essentially is what it is, right? So if you have a surplus of food, prices will come down. However, I was looking at this, and this is actually, it probably won't be a top story anywhere, but this is actually one of the bigger news affecting, not only do you have the Hurricane Ian in Florida, which is probably going to really rupture the orange juice market. I mean, not even for real, like the last projection was like, orange juice is going to go up like, say, 30% and things like that. But Florida produces other produce as well as California. So, for example, this was a big one. There were 2 things I remember. I remember India was raising the essentially the taxes when they export rice. And then they're a big rice producer, and also California is a big rice producer. And I guess there's a shortage of water in California. So if anyone is out there in California listening to this show, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this thing. Have you heard anything like where you live, where like you just can't flush a toilet, you can't wash your car, that kind of stuff? I'd love to hear if there's rationing. I used to live in LA, and that is a thing, water rationing. And when you read this description, and I'll read it for you guys here. This is a local person in Chochilla. They're saying, it's been so dry this year, we didn't get much rain. We didn't get much snowpack. Everybody's very careful with what water they're using. In fact, my granddaughter is emptying the kids' little pool to flush toilets. It's kind of interesting. And then the more detailed description is, more than 1,200 wells have run dry this year statewide, a nearly 50% increase over the same period last year. And that's according to the California Department of Water Resources. And then to give you a general sense of like what it normally is, in 2018, 19, and 20, there were fewer than 100 wells that run dry. So that is a big difference, right? 1,200 wells run dry, and in the past it'd be more like 100. So that is a big difference. And like I said, this probably won't be huge headline news, but I don't think this is a small thing to have a drought. And essentially, you're going to have a problem with crops going into this coming year. The pound has been rallying on the essentially the UK thing, but some people are saying, don't count on it. Who knows, right? I'll just show you the charts. I have no prediction on this. I will say though, I do think energy costs are going to be a real thing. When people share these stuff about that, I think it is real. Like for example, someone believe it was Germany was sharing that. Just imagine if your bill was like $200 this month, and next month suddenly it's like 2,000. You'd be like, oh my god, what is going on? And especially for families that live paycheck to paycheck, this is a real thing in Britain, and also too, the weakness of the pound affects, like, it's more expensive to buy energy that's coming in from the other country, and also too, if you have a business or something like that has to buy, say, food coming from another country, just for example, or any kind of foreign good, when the pound plummets, it costs you quite a bit of money. So the pound is starting to recover. You guys can see here, crazy bounce. I guess it bounced off 104, something like that, and then it was 114. This is against the dollar. One thing too, which is, we've mentioned this before, guys, is I think Europe is going to be a real fight among countries within the EU, and it's going to be every country for themselves, regards to energy. I don't think they're going to be sharing. And in fact, Germany's already like, you know what? We're not sharing with France. We're not sharing with Spain. We're just not sharing. And this is an interesting thing, right? And I'd love to hear Europeans' opinion on this. Like, do you think that Germany should be sharing with everyone else, or do you think it's just going to be every country for themselves? And this could be actually really serious. I don't know what the temperatures are right now. If you feel like it's getting cold, say in the UK, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Or when does the cold season end? I can just tell you here in Korea, we had our first cold night just yesterday, actually. Had to get out the winter blankets and start changing our clothes, etc. And the weather's starting to turn. So I think it's going to be happening pretty soon. I mean, we're already October, and it's just going to depend where you are. But I think this energy spike thing is really something to watch, especially going forward. So keep an eye on that. This particular story as well is important. So first we were talking about the pound. What's that thing doing? I guess in Pakistan, there's a real worry that their currency could completely collapse. They're giving it like a 50%, 50-50 odds of whether it does. So we'll keep an eye on this. There were major floods this past year, and we've talked about it a bit, and it's actually really, really quite serious. So it's done a lot of damage to, not only loss of life, but also to the economy. And, all these things, come together. Turkey's another one of those countries that you just got to watch out for. They're having massive, crazy inflation there. I think Sri Lanka was another one where they're having economic problems as well. So these are the things that are happening around the world, and they kind of all add up. I kind of believe in the butterfly flaps its wings things. Essentially one thing that happens, it kind of affects all of us, and so that's why we keep track of all these things together. Another thing that's going on back to the USA. Is the FDA is talking about approving an over-the-counter birth control, and this is quite interesting. So, just for example, here in Korea, I'm not sure about China. I have no comment on that, but I know, like, say Korea or like a China, probably Japan too. Now I think about it, but essentially, you can just buy birth control pills or the pill. You just go to the pharmacy and you buy them, right? The same way you would buy cold medicine like that. But in the USA, my understanding is you have to get a prescription, and they're talking about changing that law, and I don't know exactly why we'd even have those laws to begin with. Why not just let people get the pill? Who knows? I guess maybe in USA people would abuse these things for different reasons. I don't know, but essentially they're talking about making it over the counter, which I think is an interesting thing because the abortion laws have changed in the USA, and so that's going on with that. And the other cultural change I think is really interesting as well in the USA is I was reading this, and it's the notion that I haven't even heard of this, and I'd be curious if you guys know about this. I guess that there's a kind of a movement because homes are so expensive in the USA these days that you may have families living together. So, for example, if you say have a single mom with two kids and then another single mom, and the two moms are friends and they may have two kids, and then you're like, you know what, we can't really afford a house separately, so let's just all live together. And so you have like two separate families live. I don't know if you'd have a situation where you have like a set of like say two married parents, like say four parents in the same house. I'm not sure if that's the thing, but evidently this idea of buying houses together and living together longer is something that is sort of occurring. And so I'm not surprised, and it's something I've talked about quite a bit. I still think the fundamental of democracy is home ownership, owning your own land, owning your own place, and also to being able to start your own business. So hopefully we can get back to that kind of world again. But we're in a situation where, and this has just been happening. It's not like a one day suddenly wake up and happening. It's just been going on for a long time, where the big corporations are buying out single family homes, or big corporations are essentially pushing out mom and pop stores. So keep an eye on these kind of stories. That's changing the landscape of the USA. And then on a positive note, which I always want to try to leave a positive if I can, I thought this story was really, really cool, to be further frank. Essentially, what it is Americans who are disabled, or Americans who are in wheelchairs, this kind of thing, their employment levels are at record levels. Basically, they're really high right now, and I thought that was really cool because essentially, because we can work from home now, they're, the offices like don't have to worry about trying to accommodate them, essentially, to create new stairways or whatever, or maybe the offices that just aren't designed for people. And it could be any number of things. It's not just wheelchair. Maybe that you have a dog, something like that. And this is something I always tell the same story and over again. When I was in college, I had a neighbor who was in a wheelchair, and I didn't really have much experience of that before. The only other time was when I was a kid in elementary school. We had a girl in the class that was a wheelchair, and I used to push her around the playground to play with her in the wheelchair, because it's perfect. No other kids would play with her. And it was a similar thing when I was in college. I had a neighbor down the hall, and not many people would make friends with him, and I did, because that's just the kind of person I am. And I used to just go sit in his room with him and play video games. And I remember, and this is something that I always talk about because it just changes your perspective, is growing up basically a boy in USA, you think, oh, if you don't play football, then you're a sissy, that kind of talk. And when you hang out with someone who was essentially born and had to be in a wheelchair for their life, that doesn't apply to them. And it's just something that I think there's a lot of people out there who are perfectly capable of doing any office job, because you don't have to do anything physically. You can just do all the work at your computer. I know physically, but being able to walk isn't a prerequisite for a job, right? And one of the things that I just think this work from home thing is great. It's something I hadn't thought about before. And this is just a positive thing that could come from this work to home thing, to give more people opportunities to have jobs that maybe not would have had in the past. And I think anytime someone can be self-sufficient and productive, member of society, I think that's wonderful. And so, happy for these people, and just wanted to bring that to a point, because I don't think, like I said, some of these stories that we talk about, I don't think they're going to meet headlines, but not everything in the world has to be a headline. I think sometimes it's just great to understand the culture, the changes that are happening, and sort of kind of understand, how can I say, the makeup of a people, makeup of a place, and get the kind of the mood of the country of where people are dealing with right now. So kind of people are dealing with energy costs, housing costs, and just trying to make ends meet. And again, anytime you see someone given a job, and especially if they have the talent, and there's no reason to hold these people back. So not congratulations, but just good to hear this kind of thing. So anyway, this has been your daily Uncut news. I always appreciate you joining us, and I'll see you guys next time.